This is Model Context Protocol clearly explained for people that are not technical and just want to understand why it applies to them without all of the jargon. We'll go through a demonstration and then we'll go through in detail, layer by layer, why MCP is the missing link for these LLMs to be super useful. Let's start. For this demonstration, let's compare what LLMs can do by themselves versus what people actually need in the real world. Well, if you think about it, ChatGPT can summarize long form documents, it can explain historical figures and events, it can write creative prose and poetry. But what are the real world needs that people actually have? If you think about it, we need the ability to send and receive emails. We need it to be able to fetch live data from the internet. We need to be able to update a database or spreadsheet and access and modify private local files. In response to LLMs not being very useful by themselves, what people have been doing in response is gluing on tools to these chatbots to make them a little bit more useful. So if you think about it, people can glue on Gmail or they can glue on Slack, and that improves the functionality of these chatbots an additional level. But the issue is that all of these tools that they're gluing on essentially speak different languages. And that results in a really messy middle where everything that gets attached to these LLMs becomes so difficult to manage because every single one is technically different. That's where MCP is really interesting. If we really build off of the language analogy, what happens is that all of those tools then link to the MCP and get standardized in the same language. And then that model context protocol links to the chatbots and LLMs so that the LLMs can actually use those tools. Now, you might be asking me, Timothy, why the heck do I care if ChatGPT or Claude uses these tools without an MCP? And that's actually a great question because if you think about it, as long as I can use the tools with the chatbot, that's what's most important, right? Well, here's the kicker. Because MCP standardizes this process, that unlocks the opportunity for so many other tools to be able to be linked to ChatGPT and Claude. Because currently, the ability for them to do so is so technically difficult that it is a pain in the butt to be able to manage. But now with MCP, this standardizes that process. So this unlocks and creates an exponential growth in the number and amount of tools that are available for us to use. We're headed to a world where we're going to be able to connect ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini to so many different tools, softwares, and services that the amount of usefulness that it's actually going to bring to us is going to be insane. I know that was a quick overview, but I wanted to show you on a high level what we're going to be talking about. So let's actually dive into the details of these different phases. Here's how we can actually visualize chatbots or LLMs as they exist when they're by themselves. Just think about this glowing orb that is trapped in this solid block of ice. It's this isolated genius that is amazing by itself, but what does that actually do for us? Right now, we are in this era of gluing on tools, and this is effective in the short term. But like we talked about in that demonstration, the reason that this is not beneficial for us in our productivity of actually using these chatbots is because this process is so fragile and unscalable for the technical developers that are actually connecting everything together. And for us as the users and who are not technical, we want the ability to be able to seamlessly connect to all of the apps, softwares, or services that we use so that we can make the most out of these LLM tools. If you think about it, earlier we used the example of the language barrier. So every tool basically speaks a different language. Tool A speaks English, tool B speaks Spanish, tool C speaks Japanese, and connecting them requires the developer to build a custom translator for every connection. That's why MCPs are so interesting because they serve as the universal translator so that every app that is speaking a different language now becomes standardized and it becomes so much easier to link to these LLMs. And it just creates a crazy opportunity because something that was so fragile and unscalable before becomes so standardized, unlocking so much potential for people to develop tools that connect to these chatbots. Let's dive into detail of how it works using an analogy of a restaurant. So imagine there is you, the guest, there's the waiter, and there's the chef. Every request that you make from the waiter, he'll bring you back something that you can actually eat, or in this case, use, right? So that's the easiest way to think about it. Before, if you didn't have the MCP protocol or waiter, you would have to spend so much time figuring out, okay, how can I prep the ingredients for this to make this? Or how can I prep the ingredients for this to make this? And every part of that process was so fragile and unstable, and there was no standardization from it. But now you have this amazing opportunity where you have this waiter who will just bring you food that you can eat or quote unquote use, regardless of what menu item you order. Now, you might be asking, what does an MCP even consist of? Well, that would be a great question. An MCP basically gives you three capabilities: tools for you to take action, resources to be able to read data, and prompts on how to use them best. And I like this visualization of a wrench, a book, and a blueprint. I don't know, when I think about those three visualizations, it makes it so much easier to remember what capabilities the MCP connection even gives you. Now that leads me to what we were talking about towards the end of the demo earlier, which is the ecosystem that MCPs unlock. We're moving towards a world where there's essentially just going to be an app store for different AI capabilities or plugins. Imagine a directory where you simply install Google Drive or connect your AI to Slack. You paste the URL and your AI assistant instantly gains those skills. And if we want to think about this in a practical sense, we can just think about it being used in business. So an AI will be able to read a Google Sheet, analyze the data, and use an MCP server to email you a summary report automatically. Take a step back and think about what we're talking about here. Initially, chatbots or LLMs were isolated, but then now MCPs give them the ability to connect to a multitude of different tools that actually make them useful. If you think about an analogy, think about a human being that only had access to a word processor like Microsoft Word. But what can that human being actually do if you gave it the internet or you taught it how to actually access Gmail, create a PowerPoint slide, email you a summary report? It makes that person so much more skilled in being able to accomplish tasks that are actually useful. And if I think about what I'm personally excited for, it's moving from this world of chatbots to an AI assistant like Iron Man's Jarvis. MCP is the foundational step required to actually make that a reality. I mean, look at the ability to connect to your calendar, to connect to your phone, to connect to your laptop, all in one place. Like, how crazy is that, guys? These things are going to be integrated into our lives and capable of real world action. But with that all being said, I do want to admit, the current reality is that it's still kind of early. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows yet. Setting up MCP currently involves a lot of technical configuration that people like you and I perhaps aren't comfortable enough yet to do. But we're moving towards a world where that's going to be so seamless to set up. And when that happens, I'm really excited for the leverage that that's going to unlock for just the average person. That is a quick explainer on Model Context Protocol or MCP. If you're like me, you've probably been hearing this term all over the place and you're not technical. So I wanted to dive deep into it so that I could understand how it actually relates and affects me and understand it in plain English. So I hope I was able to explain that well for you guys. And I hope you stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to be diving into all things Claude and just seeing how we can make the most out of this crazy world that we're living in right now. Thank you.